I'd like to hand it off to our first speaker of the evening, York County Executive Steuart Pittman.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, so this is the third out of three of the town halls that we're doing during the public comment period for the general development plan. So we have this 45-day period where the draft people can put comments in. Not the first opportunity or the last opportunity to comment on this. We've gotten thousands and thousands of comments on Plan 2040. And the next round will be when it goes to the county council, and they have to approve this plan for it to become the plan for Anne Arundel County. And so people will have another opportunity. So what's different about this plan from past general development plans is that it has a lot of teeth in it. And those teeth are part of the implementation plan that's in the document. The second half is a series of very specific recommendations that if they're not adopted, then we're not implementing our plan. It's going to be up to the politicians to make a decision to do that, but it's up to the residents to push the politicians. And what I have to say about this part and our topic tonight about an inclusive future is that I would say for Anne Arundel County, it's different, it's new, and some might say it's controversial. That it's controversial to say that when we do our land use planning, we want to make sure that everybody is served by it. And I've got to admit that when I came into this office, I thought I was pretty clever by shortening the county slogan from the best place to live, work, and start a business to just the best place. And then when our county topped the state rankings for hate bias incidents reported to our police department. And a lot of us realized that that was a wake-up call, that our country's very divided and our county's divided. And we have a history in this county of racism. We have a history in this county, like many other places, of people really wanting to isolate themselves in their neighborhoods and not be near people that aren't like them, and sort of a rejection of diversity and inclusion. And we want to change that. I mean, I'm a father of twin 11-year-old boys, and I want nothing more than for them to grow up in schools and in community where not everybody looks like them, so that when they grow up in the world, that they're comfortable around people that are different than them. And what I've noticed, even in county government, in our office, is that the more diverse we are, the more creative we are. And this isn't a new concept for Anne Arundel County. This is actually law. There's fair housing law that jurisdictions are really mandated to end the kind of exclusionary zoning, the redlining that financial institutions have done, often based on race, ethnicity. And when we look at the history of our county, it's here too. We've had investment in the neighborhoods with public resources, infrastructure investment in the neighborhoods that have not only the greatest wealth, but it tends to also be the neighborhoods that are the most white and often the most organized. And as an old community organizer, I get that. I mean, I encourage people to organize in their communities and demand government services, and I'll never stop advocating for that. But the reality is that lower wage workers and families that are on the edge financially are much less likely to participate in community meetings and even things like tonight. So we've made a real effort to try to engage people in this process who aren't normally engaged. And we're going to continue to do that. And so that's one of the reasons that we want to highlight some of the things in this plan that people should know about. That if people want a better future for their children, particularly minority communities and lower income communities that have been neglected in the past, they need to mobilize, and they need to support what's in this plan that does that. So a few examples of things are trees. trees. I mean, we've looked at where the trees are in the county, and a lot of our lower income communities and our more minority communities where there's higher density in a lot of cases and it's been developed, there are very few trees. And so we're going to make a real effort to plant more trees in urban areas and developed areas, because studies show that when people are around trees, their mental health outcomes are better and their overall health outcomes are better. Transit, public transit for people who don't have cars. We want to get people off the roads anyway because we have too much traffic. And so we're pushing towards transit-oriented development, and we're actually supportive in some cases of density, which is a dirty word for a lot of people who came to this county because it's got suburban neighborhoods and single-family homes with nice lawns and nice lots. And nothing in this plan changes that. It doesn't make it illegal to have lower density communities. Those are there, and maintaining the neighborhoods as they are older neighborhoods, so that they have quality housing and the older housing stock remains usable by having rehab loans and things like that, is all very important. But when we're thinking about development patterns, we really believe that it's a wise thing to have commercial and residential and in the same areas sometimes, and office space as well, so people can live and work and shop in the same area, which gets cars off the road. I mean, it's just basic common sense. And in our region, if you look at what's happened in Baltimore City, it's pretty clear that the developers that act regionally, they go where they can make money, and they pretty much migrated out of the city and into the suburbs because we offered them a lot of low taxes and low regulation to be able to build what they want, and it's been profitable. And the result has been that the city of Baltimore has lost its tax base. And I think anybody that you ask in the region would say, well, smart growth means investing in Baltimore City and other areas where there's infrastructure, town centers and places like that. So if we really stick to a plan and we really do what the smart growth principles recommend, then our whole region is going to improve. I have to say that no matter what we do to invest in areas that are lower income, for instance, West County has had very little investment in parks, rec and parks. And that's not necessarily a low income area, but on average, a little bit more low income and a little bit more diverse than some other parts of the county, and probably a little bit less politically connected in the past. And we know that people get investment in their neighborhoods when they're politically connected. So we're making an effort. We've mapped the county and we're seeing what communities have been underserved, and we want to serve those communities with those kinds of investments. And that's part of Plan 2040 as well. And the last thing I want to say is that during this pandemic, it's gotten worse. And if income disparities continue to grow at the rate that they're growing, it will only continue to get worse. And it doesn't matter where people live. If people don't have jobs, then their families are going to could be in serious trouble, and our whole county's in trouble. So you're 8 times more likely to have lost your job in this pandemic if you're a low wage worker than if you're a higher wage worker. And so right now, more than ever, we're focusing on rebuilding the safety net, providing a safety net so that this pandemic does not leave behind a whole huge segment of our population and put more and more people into poverty. So we have to make sure that those programs are in place. But when we look long term, and Plan 2040 is about the next 20 years, are the children of families who don't make as much money going to have opportunity? Are they going to be able to go to as good schools as higher income families? Are they going to have parks to play in? Is the housing going to be adequate and healthy for them to live in? Are there going to be health resources in those neighborhoods, public transportation nearby so people can actually get to work and get to jobs? That's really essential. And I think any human being would hope that those kids can grow up and have opportunity like other kids. So that's a really big part of what Plan 2040 is. I think most people don't think about land use that way, but the intersection of land use and all of our health and human service work is important. And in our administration, you can ask our Deputy CEO for Land Use, who's here, Lori Rhodes, and our Deputy CEO for Health and Human Services, Pam Jordan, and they'll tell you that their work is connected, and that's a great thing for the county. So back to you, Matt.
Thank you, County Executive. And you just introduced our next speaker, even if you didn't know it. That is our Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Land Use, Miss Lori Rhodes, who's going to tell you a little bit about that exclusionary past and about our inclusionary future as it pertains to land use and zoning. So Lori, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. You know, it's always hard to follow the county executive, but I'll do my best. I actually did some research so I could be prepared to talk about our past and how this exclusionary zoning actually separated neighborhoods. For many years, I served in the zoning division, and I really just interpreted laws, crafted laws, and administered the laws of the zoning code without really thinking about how these laws actually increase the wealth gap. So I did a little research. I looked at some land use law regulations, I looked at the zoning code, and I looked at some prior plans, and this is what I found. Exclusionary zoning began in Anne Arundel County actually with the enactment of the first zoning ordinance in 1952. Exclusionary zoning is when the exclusion has a socioeconomic effect which zones communities and segregates them according to their income and station in life. An example of exclusionary zoning powers is the requirement for large minimum lot sizes, which is a popular device that's used to create suburban communities. These zoning controls are used to preserve the character of the community as well as tax base. Other examples of exclusionary zoning include large lot frontage requirements and limitations on multifamily housing and manufacturing housing. Rural land for many decades covered most of the county. These large tracts of farmland were unaffordable to many county citizens. As Anne Arundel County's economy continued to flourish, many farmers sold their land to developers. While the county's population steadily increased, so did the demand for housing. Consequently, housing prices continued to escalate as builders constructed larger and more costly single-family homes to meet the demands of a more prosperous economy. The majority of dwelling types in Anne Arundel County in 2009 were actually single-family detached dwellings, which are very expensive. When single-family detached home communities become established, it's very, very difficult to introduce affordable housing for workforce families in these lower density residential districts, because in order to do this and make it economically viable, you have to increase density and provide other incentives. These density incentives are unwelcome by many residents due to complaints about avoiding congestion in the streets, overcrowding in schools, and often maintaining their actual suburban communities. So we really get a lot of pressure about trying to bring about more affordable housing. And the county understands these concerns because they are valid, which is why we currently have an APF Rhodes and an APF Schools work group who are diligently working to try to resolve some of these issues. Exclusionary zoning, like the county executive has mentioned, has also promoted sprawl, which uses more land to provide fewer dwelling units, which actually raises the cost of providing municipal services. This form of zoning will continue to be in demand because many residents want variety in housing choices, and the zoning laws are in place to protect their property rights. The reverse of exclusionary zoning is inclusionary zoning, which is what we're working on, which includes housing programs that are designed to achieve the actual construction of low and moderate cost housing. Although the 1997 GDP recommended investigating the feasibility of moderately priced dwelling units and the 2009 GDP recommended addressing workforce housing needs and increasing the supply, it was not until 2011 that we passed our first workforce housing bill. And since that time, inclusionary zoning tools to try to bring about more workforce housing, we still continue to get a lot of pushback. It was not until 2019 that our zoning code was amended to expand opportunities to strategically locate workforce housing in the R5 district that will require direct access on roads that are classified to handle higher traffic volumes. This legislation also allows workforce housing in zoning districts that allow higher density, including mixed-use districts where access to commercial uses in close proximity to commercial uses and other type of retail uses actually brings about smart growth. Plan 2040 calls for inclusionary development future that will increase the supply of attainable housing. Our goal is to develop an affordable housing plan so we can implement a housing strategy that decreases the wealth gap. We need the County Council's support to adopt the laws that will be crafted for this purpose. Homeownership not only provides a path to generational wealth and prosperity, it also improves health outcomes for our citizens. And that's the research that I did, and we definitely need to provide an inclusive future. I know because I've come from low income housing, I now live in a single family dwelling, and I know how important it is to have that healthy life to pass on to generations that follow me.
Thank you very much, Lori. It's so important to understand our history, and that was a great lesson you just gave us. I wanted to remind all of our panelists and our audience members, tonight is something new. We are interpreting this live into Spanish. So to make our interpreter's job a little easier, let's all pause between some of our sentences and let's speak a little slower. Thank you again, everybody. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Steve Kai Ziegler, our Planning and Zoning Officer. Steve.
Well, thank you for having me here tonight. I get the pleasure of following up on Lori's presentation. I think the items she covered are so important as we're trying to figure out how we grow into the future. And I think what I want to do is just touch on a couple of places within the Plan 2040 that helps achieve the overall objective of a much more inclusionary development future. So just a couple of things. So the first is reviewing our zoning and subdivision regulations and amending them to allow for a variety of residential forms, densities, and sizes in stable communities throughout the county. Key policy objective. A couple of subcomponents of it is to study the potential for new forms of housing or additional areas for certain housing forms in targeted residential or mixed-use zoning categories. Potential forms could include things such as duplexes or triplexes, the concept of tiny house forms. We've all heard about this terminology. They're very difficult to deal with from a permitting standpoint, and we need to make adjustments to facilitate that type of development. Other things would include shared housing, cottage houses, or secondary units, such as garage apartments or in-law suites. And second for this is to promote a variety of housing types and provide for more affordable housing options than currently exist. The second main point I want to bring up is we need to expand the supply of housing for senior adults by facilitating opportunities to age in place and create senior-friendly communities across the county. One of the techniques we can consider is a concept called universal design, meaning whenever you build something, whether it's a residential home, a commercial use, or in certain industrial uses, over the years that the facility is viable, it can be converted from one use to another. And the last thing I think I want to talk about is we need to increase the supply of affordable housing units throughout the county, especially in communities of opportunity. without further concentrating affordable units in areas of older housing stock and high concentrations of low to moderate income households. So those are just a couple of the policy objectives that exist within Plan 2040. And I want to stress, as we always do in these town hall meetings, the plan by itself is a plan. The only way that we achieve policy objectives is through implementing ordinances, codes, policy objectives. So that concludes my portion.
Thank you, Steve. And one of the almost final things you said there was affordable housing. And we would all agree, all the panelists on tonight, that there's no better person in this county to talk about affordable housing than Kathy Koch, Executive Director of Arundel Community Development Services. Kathy, please tell us everything your group is doing and everything this plan does to bring more affordable housing to Anne Arundel County. Kathy, you are actually muted. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Matt. And thank you. I'm going to try and talk slow. It's kind of hard for me, but I'm going to do my best. But I think I'm one of the experts because I've been around for so long. This is my third general development plan. And I got to say, not just to fluff the people who are here, but when I read this plan, it's the first time this plan has so much meat and so much substance to it when I compare it to the other general development plans and the processes I have gone through with this county. So I want to thank our county executive and his administration. And Steve, I got to pat you guys on the back. You did the planning, our Office of Planning and Zoning did a really fantastic job on this plan. So Arundel Community Development, affectionately referred to as ACDS, operates as the county's housing and community development agency. And in that role, we will lead a lot of the efforts to try and achieve the housing goals that are defined in Plan 2040. I kind of looked at it and said, well, I can put this into three buckets, three big goals. And what the plan does is the first goal, a very, very important goal, is to focus on improving and retaining our already existing supply of affordable housing. And we do that through, and we're going to be doing that through a lot of, couple different efforts. But one of the big efforts is always to focus on our single family owner occupied housing units that are occupied by people at 80% and below the median income. And that's to have a program in place that we can help people fix up their homes, whether it's a leaky roof, failing heating and cooling systems, or any other things that need to be done to address the structural issues, is to have programs in place and funding in place to help people stay in those units and remain in those units. And the program that we have in place right now, probably about 60% of the applicants are our seniors. So it's a very, very important program for our seniors. The second piece on focusing on improving and retaining our existing supply is our multifamily complexes. And we do a lot of work, and we see ourselves doing a lot of work into the future, working with our Housing Commission to improve our public housing communities and to transfer them into the new future, and also private owners of our larger multifamily complexes to improve those complexes and make sure that we don't reduce the number of already existing supply of affordable housing. And then the third one is our acquisition rehab program. And this is where we acquire units, fix them up, keep them as rentals, sometimes sell them for home ownership. And those programs are focused really in our older communities and our revitalization communities. So it's very important to focus on keeping up our existing supply. The second big goal is to increase the supply. As Steve had mentioned, is that where we focus a lot on saving our existing supply in our older communities, what we're looking at doing and increasing our supply is to look at areas of opportunity. And just generally, areas of opportunities are areas with well-performing schools, low crime rates, and a low percentage of low to moderate income people. If I'm doing that or not. We believe that the policies and action steps that the plan identifies will help us get there. The plan includes different financing ideas and also land use incentives, which make all the difference in the world, and exploring making surplus county property available for the development of affordable housing. It also, the plan talks about exploring a moderately priced dwelling unit ordinance. This is something that there's been a lot of talk about in my 30 years that I've been here. But I think that we're actually looking at trying to make that happen. And it's one of the best tools, especially for inclusionary, because although it doesn't produce millions of new units, it produces those units in scattered sites throughout the county, scattering and allowing people to live in communities with lots of opportunities. The third big bucket, so the first bucket was in improving keeping our existing supply going. Second is to increase our supply. And the third is to provide funding that helps people live in our existing market. So this is our rental assistance program and our eviction prevention programs and our rapid rehousing programs. So these are to continue to expand and provide these programs so that help people to be able to afford the existing rental units that are in our community already. So in closing, I'm just going to say to achieve inclusion in our housing market, you need to understand that the housing market is one of the few things that does not operate on supply and demand. In order to get a supply of housing that is affordable to people at 100% and below the median income, there must be incentives in order to make it happen, because the natural market does not make it happen. And the plan talks about a lot of different land use incentives to help make that happen, but it also puts forward an idea for a housing trust fund. I always say affordable housing is not rocket science. It's land and it's money. And so looking for ways to also to provide that financing through a housing trust fund. So that's my 2-second cap, and we look forward to answering any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. And now I think the audience knows, just as we do, how much you know about affordable housing. All the panelists on this panel tonight are just a pleasure to work with because they have so much expertise in their area. And I'm going to pivot now to our next panelist with a lot of expertise in economics and economic development and bringing jobs to this county. And that is Ben Birge, our Executive Director of Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation. Ben, take it away.
Okay, I need to kill my video, is that correct? Or can you hear okay?
We can hear you right now, so I think you're okay.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Ben Birge. I'm the President, CEO of the Anne Arundel Economic Development Corporation. AAEDC is here to help businesses. We have a number of financing and training programs that help businesses get off the ground, succeed, and grow. In fact, last week, we had a virtual ribbon cutting for a company in Glen Burnie that we helped, starting from its days in a room above a garage, all the way to its expansion into a 57,000 square foot building. Helping our county businesses, both during the pandemic and pivoting out of the pandemic in the future, is one of the greatest tasks facing this county. Though our business climate continues to struggle, Anne Arundel County is outpacing the rest of the state during the recovery in almost all metrics. Not surprising, our floor is pretty high due to our phenomenal strength in technology and cyber. Our cyber tech ecosystem has roughly 1,800 businesses, and this will continue to grow as the data center craze is coming to Central Maryland and looking at Fort Meade as a logical home. But we also face a lot of challenges. One example is the decline of traditional retail shopping as a whole, and older shopping centers and malls specifically. Office space vacancy rates were increasing before the pandemic and likely will continue after. But working through the Plan 2040 process, we can prepare for what's next. We can aid our in the transition from less face-to-face shopping to more online shopping and curbside pickup. Targeted revitalization programs and policies, which include financing programs for businesses, zoning changes to spur development in the right areas, and efforts to bring businesses to livable communities will shape work we do. We will establish mixed use opportunities to enhance and diversify our communities. And hopefully, as the county executive said, get some cars off the road. And we will continue to keep our agricultural economy in the 21st century through programs that reduce costs for farms and increase their opportunities to generate better revenue through agritourism, special events, and farmers markets. We will also play an expanded role in our transportation future. A recent analysis gave Arundel a score of only 2.6 out of 10 for transit opportunities. We know where the people live. We know where the employers are. We know where the existing transit nodes are. Connecting people to their work in a reliable and safe manner through transit is one of the keys to successful economic development. Plan 2040 includes an entire section dedicated to a healthy economy. But what does that mean? Is a larger tax base the measure of success? Or is the strength and resiliency of that tax base? We don't want the tree to grow too high and too fast if the roots aren't strong enough to hold it during a storm. In closing, there are 6 main goals supporting the development of a healthy economy. 1, smart growth that supports opportunities. 2, attraction, retention, and expansion of our diverse business sectors. 3, Fort Meade. 4, BWI Thurgood Marshall Airport. 5, enhancing commercial hubs and corridors. And 6, prudent use of our natural resources. Your AAEDC team will be there throughout this process to deliver on the creation of a healthy economy that is strong, diverse, and sustainable. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Ben, and you certainly have been there over the last few weeks with all the programs going out. Thank you for everything you and your team have done. So now I want to hand it over to our last speaker. We're running a little long as we're trying to speak slowly, so bear with us, but that's Pam Jordan, our Deputy Chief Administrative Officer for Health and Human Services. Pam.
Thank you, Matt. And I just have to say that all the remarks have just been really profound this evening. Like Kathy Koch, this is my 3rd general development plan, and Plan 2040 actually is inclusionary. Before I became deeply invested in health and human services, I was actually the zoning enforcement supervisor. And talk about exclusionary, people simply wanted to build a room onto their home with a kitchenette for their mother or mother-in-law, and it was not permitted. I am so pleased to hear how we are including older adults, which are the fastest growing population in Anne Arundel County. And the fact that we're looking at smart growth and having transit, residential, commercial, and office space all in the same area. Do you know what that means to people with disabilities? Transportation is such a barrier to people with disabilities, and to have opportunities right in their own community is amazing. So everybody wants to contribute, and inclusionary zoning is the means to do that. So I look at this through the lens of equity, and I look at it through the lens of health and wellness. And I am so pleased with what I am seeing so far, and pleased to be part of this team as we move forward with Plan 2040. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam, and thank you to all of our panelists. That concludes this portion of the agenda. And at this point, I'm going to invite the audience members to raise your virtual hand by pressing the raise hand button. And once you do so, I will ask you to unmute one at a time. No reason to be shy, folks. Oh, I see the first hand going up. All right, Kaya, welcome.
Hello, Matt. I know the discussion was heavily based on the kind of building and zoning and, affordable housing. But there was, as county exec had mentioned about kind of like the kids and like programs for that. Can anyone touch a little bit more about what kind of programs or things that you will be having for children, whether they are going to be able to be inclusive, where they are diverse, and no matter what kind of economic or racial background?
Yeah, Pam Jordan, go ahead.
One of the things that's really exciting, Kaya, right now is the development of the Severn Intergenerational Center, where we have a very diverse community, and we're going to have lots of opportunities for people of all ages, but including our youth with the Boys and Girls Club. And I just have to give a shout out to our Boys and Girls Club organization throughout the county on how inclusive they are with their programming. So we do have on the horizon a really exciting project in West County that will be inclusive and provide incredible opportunities for our youth. And I don't know if anybody else wanted to contribute. I didn't know if I cut off the county executive, but Mr. Pittman, I'll mute myself now.
That's okay. You can cut me off anytime, Pam. Obviously the school system itself isn't controlled by the county government. It's got its own separate oversight with the school board. However, the county does fund it, and the capital improvement plan for the school system is it's done by them. They have their capital budget, but once again, we fund it, so we have a certain amount of influence over what gets done and what doesn't get done. But I have to say that the rec and park side of things is a really important part. And this doesn't go into the plan for everything that Rec and Parks will build. That's part of their plan. The land LPPR, land preservation, parks and recreation plan, I believe it is. And so they look forward, and we're actually overlaying demographic data in the county to see whether there's equity in the investments that we've had so far. So expect more in areas that have been underserved. Severn Intergenerational Center is going to be a great investment. Yeah, I mean, I guess, the other part of it is making sure that some of our magnet schools, some of our best schools that kids who may not even live in those neighborhoods can access. And that our magnet school system it's done by lottery, and it's designed so that it does create a little bit more diversity in some of the schools, and access to special programs for everybody. But the opportunity gap task force that has been operating, we're about to release a report with recommendations on that. And that's been something where the school system as well as county agencies have worked together once again, this is not the first time this effort has been made. It's failed every time, but there's always been efforts. We have not closed the opportunity gap or the achievement gap. Some people call it, we're now calling it opportunity. But that report's going to be coming out within a couple of weeks. I think end of November, we're going to do an event around that with the recommendations. And it's a roadmap. It doesn't solve the problems, but what's good about it is that it does have the school administration working with all the other county agencies in the community. It was launched with a meeting with well over 100 residents to once again confront that really terrible problem, which is that outcomes in schools are not even across race, certainly not across income, and we have to do better at uplifting the kids who are in the most trouble in our schools.
Thank you, County Executive. And I think, Steve, you had your hand up.
Very briefly, I'm going to try and answer your question from a bit of a different angle. And one of the things we need to keep in mind is in order to achieve the policy objectives in Plan 2040, we need to be far more inclusionary and inclusive and embrace our, I'm going to say, diversity. Part of that, there will be a series of region plans that will include a citizen-appointed advisory committee. We are committed to implementing the plans. We will have a citizen-led implementation advisory committees. We've got a lot of planning work that needs to be done. And one of the difficulties we've struggled with in the past is putting together citizen advisory groups that are representative of the community. So there is nothing wrong with our younger residents from participating in our planning processes. And Key, if you just keep this conversation as mine, as we move forward with further planning processes, we need to be more inclusive of our citizens who participate in all the programs that we offer. So there's many opportunities coming up in the future for young people to participate.
Thanks, Steve. And I would ask the audience again, we've got 14 folks on the Zoom. I'm sure many more on Facebook watching. If you have a question, please do raise your hand. I'm not seeing any other questions at this time. Steuart, County Executive.
I don't know if this is a question or an answer or a comment, but one of the questions that I hear sometimes when we talk about these issues is from people who are more concerned about losing what they have rather than gaining what they don't have. What am I going to lose? A fear that if we're encouraging workforce housing, that might mean a change in my neighborhood where there's going to be more traffic, which is a serious threat. Nobody wants more traffic. That my kids' school is going to be overcrowded. Our classrooms, we do not want them. We want to reduce class size, not increase them. Is there going to be more crime? Is an issue that we hear about. And are there just going to be more people? Are you when you say workforce housing, are you trying to promote and increase development in Anne Arundel County and increase our population? Look at what's already happened. We have had a huge increase in population and we don't have the infrastructure to handle it. So what I want to say is that none of our efforts to do workforce housing or affordable housing let anybody get around the need for infrastructure. That's why our adequate public facilities group on roads and schools and all of that is actually getting tougher on those requirements, not weaker, because we know that we failed to provide the infrastructure. And what about our open space and our environment? Some people think that there's a tension between affordable housing and environment, whereas a lot of people support both. And we've had town hall, we've had meetings about, strictly about the environmental protections in this GDP. How can you be doing that and also saying you want more affordable housing? What we want is housing for every income level. And what we've had in Anne Arundel County is development where there's been a glut of luxury homes. In fact, the last time they did the reassessments of housing values, it was the luxury homes that dropped in value because there were so many of them built by developers because they thought that's where the money was. And the value of the affordable homes went up significantly. And so we're really, it's a balancing act here. And I'm not a pro-growth guy. I mean, I think our county doesn't need to grow to be able to do well. There probably is going to be some growth, but what I think is really, really important as we plan our future is that there's a place in it for everybody. And that when we do housing, this moderately priced dwelling unit stuff that Kathy Koch was talking about, inclusionary zoning, there's nothing radical about that. Most counties in Central Maryland have it. It's a requirement that when a developer does a subdivision and they're building new housing, that some percent, and it's usually a small percent, 10 or 15%, has to be constructed that's affordable for working people who work in our restaurants and in our service industries. And it's not even that low income. We're talking like 100% of median income for home ownership, right? Which is like 100 grand, and 90 and 80% for rental, sometimes as low as 60. But those are still working people. Those are teachers and firefighters and police officers and their families. These are people with jobs. And if we don't do something to require that some of that development be for people at various income levels, then we end up with a really messed up economy where everybody has to travel into our county because they can't afford to live here to be able to do these jobs, and then they travel back out. While we already know that a lot of the people in our county are traveling into DC or Baltimore to work. So it's cars on the road. It's bad for the environment. And then the other part of it is, if you really care about the environment, you should really support smaller homes. And these huge mansions on these huge lots, it's a big environmental impact. And look at the tiny home movement and the environmental impact of those. It's much smaller. So I don't believe that what we're proposing here takes anything away from anybody. I know not everybody agrees with that. There are some people who read about a workforce housing bill where some office space can be converted into residential in a developed area where there's retail downstairs, and that's somehow a terrible thing. But if you have adequate public facilities laws for schools and all of that, I think it's what most of us support, which is it's redevelopment, it's getting cars off the road, and it's what most people in the planning business see as a positive thing, which is smart growth. So I really believe that the vast majority of the public in Anne Arundel County can support what we're doing here with our, both our green future, our smart future that we talked about, and now our inclusive future that really makes it makes it a great place to be in Anne Arundel County.
Thank you, County Executive. And seeing no other hands go up, I will put it out there to the rest of the panelists. If anyone wants to have closing remarks, one at a time. Go ahead, Kathy.
Okay. I just said nobody can say it better than my county executive. But the thing is that affordable housing is not scary. It's your kids, it's your parents. It's also the people that serve you your food in the restaurant. It's the people who help you buy your merchandise in the retail store, and it's the people who do your hair. So these are the people that, and you want them. You want people to be closer, and it gives a better quality of living when you can disperse and provide all levels of housing. And there's been study after study that has been shown that affordable housing does not relate to increased crime whatsoever. So there are a lot of studies that kind of show that. So it makes for a much better future. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Steve Kai-Ziegler.
Very quickly, just a reminder to all our folks listening that Plan 2040, this draft is out there. You can still comment. November 15th is the deadline on this draft. please do. Anything you can think of as you're reviewing the document, your thoughts, please share them with us.
Thank you, Steve. And Lori Rhodes, would you like to close us out?
I'm just looking forward to implementation of this plan. I'm very excited because when I did my research and I looked at the prior plans and I saw MPDUs mentioned, and knowing that we didn't get there, but we are working on something, and Kathy knows that. So I'm just excited to see the progress of being more of an inclusive county. It's just exciting to even be having this conversation.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you, Lori. And I can't thank all of the folks who are watching with us enough. Some of your names, I have seen you now in 3 town halls, seeing the same names. So thank you for sticking it out. That shows a lot of dedication over the last few weeks. And with that, I think that we are going to close out tonight. All 3 of these are available on YouTube now, and we encourage you to view them. And as Steve reminded everyone, please go ahead and download that document. Submit your comments by November 15th. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.